Rev up your engines!
Well, here I have a message from Connor, and he says, Toyota's scamming my mom. He says his mother has a 2013 RAV4, the paint's peeling, they know it's a problem, and Toyota said that they're going to do them right and fix it. This is the Toyota Motor Company. But then she took it to the dealer last year. And they said, oh yeah, there's a problem, but there's a waiting list of 30 cars in front of you. And that it's going to be 3.5 years before we can fix the problem. They put her on a list. They said, oh, it'll be February. And then they said it's July. Well, this is what? September, and they still haven't fixed it yet. Here's the problem. I see it all the time. Japanese owners of Toyota, they want their customers to be happy. Americans run the dealerships in the United States. By and large, they just want to make money. They don't care about fixing problems. They want to make a profit. There's 30 cars ahead of you, and they can only do one car a month. It says, what kind of nonsense is that? You know, they're just stalling. That's all they're doing is stalling. This is why I say going to dealers, hey, if you can avoid it at all costs, do it. I've had people go there for free warranty work, right? But then they said, oh, you need $5,000 this other work too, trying to sell them stuff. And, of course, when you start dealing with a giant bureaucracy, Toyota's a huge company. Mr. Kropp here wrote Toyota, and here's their response, and I quote, thank you for contacting Toyota Motor Sales USA. We appreciate the continued opportunity to be of service to you. I had another customer get the same thing where his frame was rotting, and he said the same thing, you know, and some under-assistant West Coast promotion man from that old Rolling Stone song is sort of just playing a line and saying, oh yeah, we're glad to be of service to you, but, you know, basically, we're not going to do anything about it, other than say, well, they're supposed to fix it, and then there's nobody that'll fix it. They got to make it look like they care, but the level of the dealership who actually has to fix it, they obviously don't care at all. To them, it doesn't mean anything. You know, they're not making money. If there's no profit involved, they're not interested. It said they could only do one a month. What kind of nonsense is that? The reason they say that is because they're not making any profit doing that. So they don't want to do it at all. It's ridiculous. You know, it's absolutely ridiculous, the nonsense that goes on at those places. That's why I say, if you can avoid them at all costs, avoid them. Toyota's recalling 158,000 Tundra trucks because, guess what? The headlights might start on fire. Now, this is a very oddball thing. The way they set it up was they got those halogen headlights, and they burn real hot. They're like 800 degrees Fahrenheit. They get real hot, right? Well, it turns out that kind of a bad design on those. When you turn the high beams on, both the high beams and the low beams are on, and get hot enough to melt stuff and start a fire. If you're sitting idling or going at low speeds. Turns out at high speeds, 65 on a highway, it doesn't matter because there's so much wind it cools the headlamps down. But idling or low speeds, they might catch on fire. Now this is 2018 to 2021 Tundras. So Toyota's gonna have to modify the wiring to the headlamps. Guess it's too thin wires, you run all that to get too hot. And all the connectors where the bulbs go in. You're not gonna get these recalls till November 1st. So my advice is, if you're going at low speeds or idling, do not have your high beams on in that vehicle. I can't think of the last time I even used my high beams, you know? It's not something that people need all that much anymore. The light bulbs are so bright enough, you really don't need them, especially if you're idling or just sitting there or going 10 miles an hour. But they're recalling all those because the wires are too thin and the headlights are using too much power only when the high beams are turned on, because the high beams on those turn high beams and the low beams at the same time. Kind of a bad design there, and they overheat them. Dan says, should I go with my heart or my head? I don't have much requirements for my daily driver. I want a conventional automatic with 6 speeds. I'm looking at everything from the Ram 3500 to the Impala to the Mazda, either a 2017 Suzuki Vitara, a 2016 Mazda 3, or a Ram. You know, what do you want, a truck or a car? You can't even compare those two. You want gas mileage and stuff, stick to the cars, right? If you're in the United States, Suzuki, it's impossible to get car parts for. If you're in other parts of the world, I know a lot of people had Suzukis in the Virgin Islands when I was there, and if you can get parts, the guys can fix them. There's nothing wrong with that. The Mazda 3 2016 is a much better made car than the Suzuki. You're going to probably pay more for the Mazda, but your money's better out by far than it would be for a Suzuki. They're just, they're not made that well, cost a lot of money to fix them. A lot of guys don't know how to fix them. Here in the United States, it's almost impossible to get parts for the stupid thing, so the Mazda, you'd have no problems at all. The hands down, you should go for that Mazda. Brittany 29 says, my Chevy Equinox is in the shop every month. Hey, no surprise on that one. I have a 2013 Chevy Equinox that I financed in 2019. It has 89,000 miles on it then, and now it's got 116. I put a brand new engine in it. After 2 weeks of driving, it kept stalling. We figured out the wires of the car and fixed it, and then it was the computer system not registering the new engine. I fixed that. Then the starter went out. I fixed that. I'm having all kinds of problems. I gotten everything serviced at Chevy, and I'm ready to junk it, but I'm still on a car loan. Would a trade-in be better? All right. Well, first you made a mistake. You bought a Chevy Equinox, one of the biggest piles of crap ever made. I mean, look, you had to put an engine in it, and then the people that put the engine in didn't even know they had to reprogram stuff. And this is a Chevy dealer. You said you took it all to a Chevy dealer, and that's just typical. Their workmanship these days is absolute garbage. Now, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. You owe a lot of money on a vehicle that's probably worth almost nothing. But if you can possibly trade it in, woman here in Clarksville, she had a piece of crap Chevy, and I told her, get rid of it. It needs a timing chain. It's going to cost over $1,000. And the engine's falling apart anyways. Well, luckily, they gave her $5,500 on a trade-in at a Honda dealer, and she bought a Honda. I would say take that anywhere to see if you can trade it in and hope you're not upside down. You're probably upside down. That means you owe more on that vehicle on your loan than the thing's worth. And if you are, well, at least get rid of it. Get it out of your hands. They're going to offer you less money than what you owe on it. In that case, sell it locally and say, look, I can't pay for this car anymore. If you want to take up payments, you can have it for taking up payments. You can almost always find somebody who'll take up the payments, thinking, oh, well, she put all this money down in this, and I'm just paying for payments. If you can at least get rid of it that way, go ahead. Don't lose money trading it in. That's stupid. But if you can sell it just for the payments, transfer them to somebody else, do that, and then get a Toyota or Honda, a good car, not a piece of junk like that Chevy Equinox, which you found out. Sad but true. And you've been going to a Chevy dealer, they put an engine in, they didn't even know they had to reprogram it. It just shows you the low quality that they have of workmanship at those places. You know, they're paying the mechanics less and less. So, of course, they're going to get mechanics that don't know what they're doing anymore. You can't blame them. They have a little bit of training. They're not paying them anything. And, of course, it's not going to be very good work. This is because the owners want to make all the profit, pay the mechanics just a little. Oh, we can get new mechanics anytime we want. It's not easy to get good mechanics these days. There is a real lack of good mechanics in this country. It's because they don't pay them much. Why should somebody have years of training, thousands and thousands of dollars a tool, to make a little bit over minimum wage and they start? It makes no sense. So they can't get quality people to do mechanic work. Like in my grandfather's day, was a good job. Today it's like, who wants to be a mechanic? Well, it bites them in the rear end. They can't even fix their own cars at their own dealerships. CB Quill Bill says, how do I know if I need a rack and pinion on an '04 Toyota Avalon? It's leaking when I took it to a mechanic. I added fluid. I saw a leak at the hose at the back of the reservoir. I don't want to spend $1,100 to replace one. How can I tell what I need? Here's my philosophy. Always do the simple things first. Okay, the hose on the top's leaking, replace that. It's a simple thing. Replace the hose, then see what happens. If it stops losing fluid, voila. If not, and you still see the rack is leaking, then you would need a rack. Now, I'll tell you, the problem is the '04 Avalon, they built the racks poorly, and a lot of them do leak, and it's very simple to check yourself. On each end of the power steering rack, there's a bellows, a rubber bellows, 3/4 of the way out, where the inner tie rod screws in. Fluid comes out, it's leaking inside. That's not supposed to have anything in it but air. So there's fluid in the boot, the boot's leaking, and you need to replace the rack. The boot is just a dust shield to keep dust from ruining the rack. It doesn't keep fluid from leaking. That's the seal inside. So if the boot's full of fluid, it's leaking, it would need replacing. You can easily check it that way yourself. Nathan Funny says, I got an '07 Ford Expedition with 310,000 miles as a rough idle, and it's hard to get up to speed. It has new spark plugs. What's wrong? Well, it could be a lot of things wrong, but basically you got 310,000 miles on that vehicle. First thing I would do is, if you're mechanical, take a compression reading of all 8 cylinders. Or if you want to pay a mechanic, we can do relative compression tests using our fancy little machines, scan tools, and it does a relative, and it gives a pretty good idea. And if you see that more than one of the cylinders has really low compression, the engine's just flat worn out. There's nothing you can do except rebuilding the engine. Let's say the compression is good for all the cylinders. Change the fuel filter. A dirty fuel filter can do that. You could pressure test the fuel pump after that, or have it tested. If the pump's low on pressure, it'll do that. You could have a head gasket starting to blow. A mechanic can test for that. There's so many things you can do with that module, but start with the compression test, because you don't want to spend a bunch of money fixing a bunch of things and then find out, oh, the engine's worn out. And it's real easy to tell if the engine's worn out doing a compression test or paying a mechanic to do it. Well, it looks like the French are really slowing things down. In Paris, the speed limit is now 19 miles an hour. Well, why 19? Because that's 30 kilometers an hour. You know, they go by the different system. Now, they're saying they're not anti-car, but they're pro-safety and environment. It used to be 50 kilometers an hour, which is 31, you know, close to 30, pretty normal. They say, well, they want to reduce crashes and make things safer. Maybe they'll get it low enough that you could walk faster than the cars can drive. Does anybody realize that if you have all those cars that they have in Paris and you slow the speed limit down from 50 kilometers an hour to 30, you know, that's getting close to 50% slower, the traffic jams are going to get even bigger. I wonder if any of these bureaucrats thought about that when they decided to lower it that low. Now, of course, it's their future plan of, they want to get rid of cars, and they are planning on banning the sale of new gas and diesel-powered cars by 2041. That's a long time from now. And that's just banning the sale of gasoline and diesel cars. They're not saying you can't drive them, you just can't buy new ones. So, I mean, they're looking way, way, way in the future, and they may be biting themselves on that one, lowering the speed limit. They're going to create gigantic gridlocks. You still got the same amount of people, but they're driving slower in the same area. Boy, I'm not going to be driving through Paris anytime, I'll tell you that. And the hilarious thing is with them talking about banning the sale of new gasoline and diesel cars, it's not restricting used car purchases, so you can still go out and buy used ones. Some of this stuff is these guys are living in la-la land, but going that slow, boy, they're going to have a lot of after effects of this. It'll be hilarious to see what happens as time goes on. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.